fire, the most universally destructive of all natural disasters. Smoke. The slightest sniff of it is enough to trigger an instinctive reaction to flee from the danger soon to follow. Of all the creatures inhabiting this earth, only humans have learned to overcome their natural fear of fire and its byproduct, smoke.
Don't just sit there, Carla. Come over here, away from the smoke. Inhaling smoke, even in small amounts, is bad for your health.
Hey, tell me about it.
Well, it won't hurt any of you to learn something about the dangers of inhaling smoke. Any smoke. Like smoke from cars, smoke from factories, and smoke from people smoking cigarettes and cigars. Cigars and cigarettes are a major health hazard, especially for people who smoke any form of tobacco and live in cities where the air is polluted. Did you know there are 3 types of cigarette and cigar smoke? Well, there's mainstream smoke, the smoke consumed by a smoker. Then there's side stream smoke, the smoke that comes from the end of a cigarette or cigar. Side stream smoke has 3 times as much nicotine and carbon monoxide as mainstream smoke, and 98 times more ammonia, and 3 times as much benzoprene, the principal cancer causer in tobacco. And of course, there's the 3rd kind of smoke, secondhand smoke. That's the smoke that's inhaled by a smoker and then exhaled back into the air.
But Mrs. Johnson, that's disgusting. Smoke that's inhaled into someone's lungs, then exhaled back out into the air, that means it will be re-inhaled by somebody else.
But we can't stop breathing just because there's a little smoke in the air.
Of course not. But you should be aware of the danger and reduce your exposure whenever possible. You know, when I was your age, my friends and I faced a lot of peer pressure to smoke. And at times, it was difficult to resist. Well, now we know more about the danger of smoking. And it's not hard to avoid it if you want to. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, Dr. Mark Robinson, is doing some interesting research on smoking at the university. Next week, when we get back to school, we'll pay him a visit.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Robinson. Mrs. Johnson tells me that you're curious about the physiological effects of smoke on our bodies.
It's kind of like an assignment.
Well, I hope that doesn't mean you're not really interested in learning more about the health hazards associated with inhaling smoke.
Oh, no, it's just that we already know that smoking is bad for us. We hear it all the time.
Ah, yes. Mrs. Johnson told me about your campout. And I'm sure you have heard about smoking. But I believe I can show you some things today that will add a new dimension to the simple fact that smoking is bad for you. Let's take a look at some facts. These are 3 common gases. 2 of them are essential to all life processes. Can any of you tell me something about this gas?
We have to breathe oxygen to stay alive.
That's right. A healthy person can go a few days without drinking water, and perhaps a few weeks or even a month without eating. But all of us will die within minutes if we can't breathe. Under normal conditions, we inhale air containing oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. In our lungs, oxygen passes through the tissue walls and combines with red blood cells. From there, it is transferred to other cells in our bodies where it helps burn the fuels we consume in the form of food. This produces the caloric energy we require to keep us alive. Hemoglobin in red blood cells has a much greater affinity for carbon monoxide than oxygen. When carbon monoxide is taken into our lungs, the hemoglobin establishes a linkage with it in preference to the oxygen present. Because this linkage is firm, carbon monoxide is not delivered to the body's tissues as in the case of oxygen. In other words, your body is robbed of the oxygen it requires to keep all of your tissues and vital organs functioning properly. Do you have any questions on what you've seen so far?
Well, yeah. We've all had to breathe smoke at some time in our lives, and I've never had it make me feel any different. I mean, I never felt sick or anything.
I get sick when I smell cigar smoke.
I cough and my eyes water.
Well, most of us never breathe enough smoke to cause any serious problems immediately. But remember, any carbon monoxide you inhale ties up some of your red blood cells and thus reduces the efficiency of your body. Let's take a look at the blackboard. It generally requires more than 24 hours for the blood to rid itself of carbon monoxide. Now keep in mind that the three gases we've been talking about so far are all invisible. But when something burns, we generally see the smoke, right? The color that we see in that smoke comes from what we call particulate matter. Can any of you tell me what this word refers to?
It must mean parts or particles.
Exactly. When anything burns, tiny particles of structural and chemical components become airborne as particulate matter. All smoke contains particulate matter, but some is far more dangerous than others. To illustrate this, let me show you some slides. All living things must have a means of protecting themselves. One method that plants have evolved to protect themselves is to produce poisons that inhibit the attacks of their enemies. This daisy-like plant is called pyrithium, and it produces a poison so deadly it has been used for many years as an insecticide in gardens. This is another type of plant that produces a deadly poison. Can any of you name it?
Spinach?
No, not quite. This plant contains a poison called nicotine. Now can you name it?
Tobacco.
Right. And the nicotine we find in tobacco is so deadly that if I were to inject 1 cubic centimeter into my bloodstream, I would die within minutes. And if I were to light a tobacco leaf, the nicotine in it would become airborne in the smoke as particulate matter. If we were to inhale the smoke, this poison would be transferred from our lungs to our bloodstreams.
But millions of people smoke tobacco every day, and they don't die or even get sick.
That's true, but only because they are taking in very small amounts of nicotine over a prolonged period of time. And their bodies are making certain physiological adjustments to the continuing exposure of harmful gases and poisons. They are nonetheless poisoning themselves. Now, the typical reaction for a first-time smoker is to cough violently. Let's take a look at what happens inside your lungs when you inhale tobacco smoke. In the breathing process, air is drawn into the body through the nostrils and mouth. From there, it travels down the trachea, or windpipe, and into the lungs through the bronchi, or air tubes. The bronchi have many branches that gradually decrease in size, much like the limbs of a tree. Finally, after traveling through smaller and smaller bronchi, air reaches tiny air sacs called alveoli, where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. From microscopic examination of diseased lungs, we know lung cancer begins in the wall of the bronchial tubes. Here there is a thin lining containing 3 types of cells. Uppermost are long columnar cells that contain hair-like projections called cilia. In the normal lung, these cells work together in defending the lung against foreign invaders, such as dust and bacteria. The cilia have a whipping action that sweeps particles back toward the throat. The particles are carried in mucus. I'm sure you've all noticed how smokers are always coughing and spitting. That's to rid themselves of excess mucus. Due to irritation, the cells thicken, causing the cilia to disappear. Now the mucus is not swept up toward the throat and remains trapped in the bronchi. This results in a condition known as smoker's cough. Continued irritation causes the thickening of the walls of the air sacs and the formation of scar tissue. Eventually, the walls lose their resiliency and weaken. As mucus accumulates, the air becomes trapped in the air sacs and millions rupture, leading to emphysema and a precancerous condition. This illustration shows the cross-section of a human lung. How does it look to you?
It appears pink and healthy.
Right. Now what do you think?
It doesn't look as healthy.
Yes. This is what a lung will look like after someone has smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for 1 year. Now the gray coloration is caused by accumulated particulate matter from the smoke.
Now it looks even worse.
This is what a lung might look like after someone has smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for 10 years or so.
Gee, that's really gross now.
We're now looking at the lungs of someone who has probably been smoking 2 or more packs of cigarettes a day for 30 or 40 years. Here we can see many pockets of trapped air, called blebs, on the surface of the lung. This is an indicator of a disease called emphysema, which causes severe respiratory problems. or shortness of breath. It is irreversible. And here we see in this gray mass a cancerous growth which is partially blocking the bronchi and spreading to surrounding tissues.
Well, what does this mean to a person with lungs in that condition?
As I said, the emphysema is irreversible. He or she will find it difficult to breathe normally, and any strenuous activity would be impossible. Even routine chores become difficult for a person suffering from advanced emphysema affliction. Some have to carry a bottle of oxygen with them just to walk a short distance.
What about cancer? I read where they're now able to cure many types of cancer.
This particular type of cancer is difficult to treat. About the best you could hope for is removal of the lung. And if the person's other lung were in a similar condition, I'm afraid this individual would be terminal. There are over 70 different cancer-causing agents found in cigarettes, including methylethylbenzopyrene, polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, commonly known as coal tar. Coal tar placed on the back of a mouse has been proven to cause cancerous tumors. You should remember that lung cancer and emphysema are only two of the more apparent physiological problems directly linked to smoking tobacco. Every vital organ in the body is negatively affected, either directly or indirectly, by the carbon monoxide gases and nicotine poison present in all tobacco smoke. Foremost of these is the heart. Like every other part of our bodies, the heart is designed to function for many, many years if it is properly cared for. But if it is overworked and undernourished, then we can safely predict that it will not last as long as it should. And that's just what happens to the heart of a tobacco smoker. First, the carbon monoxide reduces the amount of oxygen carried by the blood, while the nicotine causes the constriction of the blood vessels. Therefore, the heart must work much harder in order to supply the body with the oxygen it requires. The result is an overworked and undernourished heart, which can result in either death or long-range disability. It can be statistically demonstrated that smokers are far more likely to suffer heart attacks than non-smokers, depending on their age group and how much and how long these individuals have smoked.
It's really hard for me to understand why anyone would want to start smoking in the first place.
Well, many factors can influence a person's decision to smoke. Some young people think they appear glamorous, more mature when they light up a cigarette. And many women believe that smoking helps them control their weight. I interviewed a woman not long ago who told me that she started smoking when she became pregnant with her second child so that she wouldn't gain as much weight as she did with her first. Not only was she putting her own health at risk, but also that of her unborn child. As you may know, after the human egg or ova has been fertilized, it attaches itself to the wall of the mother's uterus where it is nurtured by a vascular membrane called a placenta. The placenta provides the developing baby with the oxygen and nourishment it requires through a complex of blood vessels. We now know that women who smoke are 3 times as likely to have a miscarriage as those who don't, and 10 times as likely to give birth to a child that is underweight. A good deal of research is now being conducted that appears to link certain types of birth defects to mothers who smoke.
I'm glad my mother never smoked when she was pregnant with me.
Yes, indeed, you should be. Another point, tobacco is not only smoked, it is chewed by placing a golf ball-sized wad between the cheek and the teeth, sucking on it. Snuff is dipped by placing a pinch between the lower lip and gum. The smokeless tobacco user has an increased amount of saliva and must either swallow the tobacco juices or spit often. Users develop bad breath and discolored teeth. Tobacco is extremely irritating to the sensitive membranes in the mouth and the throat area. Cancer-causing substances which have been identified in tobacco contribute to cancer in and around the mouth when used in smokeless form. Tobacco chewers and snuff dippers tend to have greater tooth wear than non-users. The gums tend to recede from the teeth in areas near where the tobacco is held. The bare roots are then more susceptible to decay and can become sensitive to heat, cold, air, certain foods, and chemicals. Tobacco products decrease the user's ability to taste and smell. In addition, tobacco juices also contain hundreds of chemicals which may delay healing of a sore or wound. Nicotine is the habit-forming substance in tobacco and is found in tobacco juice as well as smoke. It is readily absorbed into the bloodstream through the lining of the mouth, where it directly affects the circulation and nervous systems. At first, nicotine stimulates the user. However, once the effect of the nicotine wears off, the user will experience a depression or a letdown. To feel good, a person with a nicotine habit needs a booster every 20 to 30 minutes. Nicotine from chewing or dipping tobacco also affects the heart and the rest of the circulatory system, much the same way as the smoking tobacco does. But you know, there are some more immediately apparent health problems associated with tobacco smoke that I'd like you all to see. In fact, we have a group of graduate students here at the university participating in a research project on the physiological effects of smoking on the human body. How you doing today, Todd?
Fine, Dr. Robinson, just fine.
15% of the population is adversely affected by cigarette smoke. I should have said tobacco smoke, with such things as asthma, hay fever, sinusitis, and other respiratory ailments. Have you smoked any cigarettes yet today, Todd?
No, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to.
I know, but I would like to show them the immediate physical effects of smoking a single cigarette. So first, let's take the temperature of your skin. This is about normal for a reading taken from the skin. Now let's take your blood pressure. First we'll take a systolic reading, which measures the blood pressure when the heart is pumping. 118, good, that's normal. Next we'll take a diastolic reading, which measures the blood pressure when the heart is relaxed. 74. All we need to do now is to see just how steady your nerves are, Todd. Let's check it with the tremor tester.
Can you hand me that, please?
It takes a steady hand to move that stylus within hole number 5 without activating the counter. And as you see, Todd has exceptionally steady hands. Okay, Todd, now it's time to light up. What does it read now?
It's about 2 degrees cooler than before.
And what does that indicate to you?
I'm not sure.
It indicates that the nicotine that was transferred from the cigarette smoke to his bloodstream in his lungs has caused his blood vessels to constrict, thus cooling his skin. Now let's take your blood pressure again. (132). Diastolic, 92. Now, what do you think this increase in his blood pressure indicates?
It must mean that his heart had to work harder in order to pump blood through the constricted arteries and vessels.
Exactly. It had to pump harder and faster to supply the body with the oxygen it needed. We should also remember that some of his hemoglobin has become fixed to the carbon monoxide, so there were fewer red blood cells available to carry the oxygen. Okay, Todd, now let's see how steady your hands are after just one cigarette. And what does this show you?
It shows his hands aren't as steady as they were before.
Yes. After smoking just one cigarette, his muscles have tensed and are experiencing slight tremors. Now, this will continue until his body purges itself of the chemicals and gases absorbed from the tobacco smoke.
I'd always heard smoking helps people relax.
Now you know that just the opposite is true. The evidence is overwhelming that using tobacco can do tremendous damage to your body. If you don't use tobacco now, don't start. And if you do, the time to quit is now. Do it for yourself or for your family, or for the rest of your community. But please do it now. You can make a difference, but only if you make the simple commitment not to smoke or use tobacco in any form. The choice is yours, and so is the life you may save.